I'm Kristen, and this is the Explorer in You podcast. Now, what I've discovered after visiting 5 continents and some amazing places is that the greatest thing standing in your way of seeing the world is what you believe is possible. I believe that travel is for everyone, on any budget, and it doesn't have to be overwhelming. So this podcast is all about unlocking the explorer in you. You'll hear stories from people who will inspire you to set big travel goals and show you how to achieve them. Let's explore. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Explorer in You podcast. I'm Kristen, and I'm excited to share this conversation with you today. It started off as me wanting to interview someone about tips for RV travel. Last year, it became one of the main ways to travel, and I really think it's going to continue to be a popular form of travel because we're still working on getting vaccinated and we're seeing new variants pop up. So I thought this would be a really valuable show. But the conversation that I had with my guest turned out to be just so much more. You'll definitely get the tips and suggestions in how to take your family on a RV vacation. But we also talk about how important traveling is to connect with other people and also to ourselves. So my guest today, Daryl Kelly, is an entrepreneur. He started several companies, the CEO and co-founder of Hectic, a company built to help support freelancers. He also owns a photography studio, and he's a philanthropist. And I wanted to talk with him because he spent 10 weeks with his wife, his 2 kids that are 6 and 9, and their 2 dogs, and traveled on the west coast of the country. Now, unfortunately, their trip was cut short because of COVID and it just got too difficult, but he really had a lot of great insights to share around his travels in a motorhome. So this conversation will give you the tips and the advice for traveling with your family on an extended road trip. But it's also a really meaningful conversation. We talk about the power of travel and all the benefits from learning more about ourselves, learning more about other people's stories, and that magic of discovery and making memories. We talk about how the RV community can be more inclusive. And I really just loved how Daryl showed up so honest and open, and he actually allowed me to do the same. So if you've been thinking about RV and motorhome travel, today's show will give you an inside glimpse on really what the experience is like, from the community to the tactical planning aspects to how getting out there can really shape who you are. I think you'll find today's show helpful. So let's jump into this conversation. Daryl, thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here. I've been looking forward to this for almost a month now that we've been talking and going back and forth.
Yeah, it's been a while. Yeah. So I wanted to start off by asking you to share a little bit about yourself and what led you to the decision to buy a motorhome and travel across the country with your family.
Absolutely. So a little bit about myself. That's always such a hard question. It's hard to talk about yourself in today's
It is.
world.
It really is. Yeah.
So a little bit about myself. I come from corporate America, and I also have this freelancing, independent creator spirit. So it's the best of both worlds, I'd say. And, I worked really, really hard throughout my career, got to a very high level of executive status with a variety of companies, have sold a few companies in terms of acquisition, had good exits from there. And I got to this place where it was just one after another and after another, and it was just momentum, and it was all work. My life was all work. If I wasn't traveling somewhere around the world, I was at home working, just work. And it didn't create a lot of opportunities for me to connect with my kids, connect with my wife in a really meaningful way that I always envisioned for my life. I was trying to make up for a lot of things that I didn't have in my past. When I grew up, we grew up really, really poor. I was actually homeless through most of middle school. And so a lot of my identity was wrapped up in work. And, my highest highs were around work and my lowest lows were around work. And I really wanted to get that balance, or get it more in balance, I'd say. And so I made an extreme decision and I left corporate America on a whim, basically. We had been talking about traveling, and to me, if I didn't make that decision, the extreme decision, we would have never done it. So I was like, let's do it. So we'd been doing some planning since the beginning of the year, specifically with COVID. Had COVID not happened, and I know this is a weird concept, and if you've lost a loved one, I absolutely feel for you. If you are displaced income wise, or if you're just in a weird mental space, I absolutely feel for you. My experience was a little bit different in COVID, where it helped me realize and sit down for the first time. Come March, I wasn't on a plane for the first time every other week, and that was odd. I was at home, and I wanted something different for my existence. And so that compression of being home, not being able to go anywhere, really pushed me and my family to wanting to make an extreme difference. And so it was in that March, February that we started planning it. And my career at the time would have never allowed us to be able to do extended travel the way that we wanted to. And so we always knew that would be a roadblock, that it would be a massive hurdle. One day, I was in a meeting and the seed had been planted for almost 7 months now. And so, or 5 months at that time. And I made a decision to go pursue traveling, go pursue going in, doing independent creating again. And that's what I'm all in and I'm continuing to do right now.
When you're talking about the pandemic and how it really has affected people differently, like the whole spectrum, right? There's been like from tragedy to, I think people really like coming back to themselves or just focusing on things that are a little bit more important to them that maybe they weren't able to. So I totally understand that. I feel like it was such a huge creative growth time for me. But then you kind of feel guilty saying that because it's affected so many people in such a tragic way. But it's just like a reminder that like there's light that comes out of darkness sometimes. And I think it's okay to like celebrate those things. But it sounds like you were able to really focus on what is that thing that's maybe missing, like that travel and spending time with your family. So it's wonderful that you had the opportunity to do that. So I found you on Instagram and I loved your feed. I loved your photography. Are you a professional photographer?
Yes. So we have a studio here in Colorado. So I'm here at home for right now. We came back just because it got really difficult with kids. I think that'll probably come up, I'd imagine, at some point in our conversation. It became really difficult to travel with kids during COVID. Playgrounds weren't open. The little details that, traveling with a 6-year-old, what do you do with a 6-year-old boy who just wants to go play on a playground and, take an easier trail, so it logistically became a little bit more challenging. And so we made the decision to come home for a few months and modify the plan a little bit and, decide in a few months, what it looks like and where we pick up and how we continue. When I think about the photography side of why this was so important to me is because I've been a professional photographer for about 9 years now. And the entire concept about photography for me is about connecting people and bringing people, allowing stories to live through moments in time, allowing stories to live through an image. And so photography studio, we have that. We do, big commercial shoots, we do events, we do weddings. And so I wanted to take that and put a lot of energy into the production with photography on the road and make really big investments into some equipment that we invested into to shoot and document the entire experience because we wanted it to be, really approachable in that sense, like really high quality moments. that didn't feel scripted or staged, but that felt like you could connect with really well. That didn't have the distraction of your typical iPhone and things like that. So I took that approach from photography studio, to bringing it into my travels, our travels, I should say.
And yeah, your imagery was beautiful, and your captions were really great. I got such a sense of how much you love your family, you love your kids. Just really great writing to accompany the photos. So glad to see that you were documenting your journey, and we got to share in that a little bit with you. What was your route? Where were you guys able to explore?
Yeah, so we only got to half of our route for this last leg that we were on. So we did 10 weeks, and we went through Western Colorado into Utah. So Eastern Utah, Southern Utah. Then we continued to trek north in Utah through Idaho. We tipped into Montana just for a little bit, but then continued through Idaho into Oregon. And we went into Oregon from the east side. We went northwest essentially to Portland area, camped of course along the way, and we went north to Seattle, Washington, Tacoma, Olympic Peninsula area. We did the islands. We did a lot of the western and northwestern side of Washington, and then made our way down the 101 all the way through California into Arizona and then New Mexico. So that was the 10-week leg that we just came off of.
You saw quite a bit. So that was only half of your trip, though, that you had planned.
Yeah, that was, and we did it really rushed because we knew, look, we're going to have to do this a little bit differently. We're, again, being flexible because you'd arrive somewhere and then the showers were closed or the bathroom was closed, or, something happened that, maybe took away from the experience that we wanted to have. Some of the resorts that we planned to go to, there's a pool. And so we wanted to go to this really cool pool that was closed. So we had to make a lot of modifications in that sense because of COVID. So this leg, we had, I want to say 15 more cities that we were intended to do. We weren't supposed to be back until springtime to Colorado area and then go out east and then do the east leg. So we had to make modifications for it.
So what are the top 3 things that you would recommend people to consider before embarking on such a huge trip like this with their families?
Ooh, okay. So I have a few things in my head, but then there's also some things that are from experience that I'm like, hey, don't do this. So I always like to be positive, but I will have one don't do this comment as well.
Okay.
So I think number 1 is following and learning from families or similar individuals that have done something that's in the same ballpark or in the same idea of what you want to do. So we spent a lot of time hopping in on Instagram, going in on Google and following travel bloggers, trying to really truly understand others that have done this, right? What are the tips that they have? And, we didn't just look at their picture. We read the details. You read the blog, you read the tips, right? Because I think we glorify the picture like, oh, that's an awesome image. Well, what's the story behind that image? And really, really good travel bloggers, travel families will tell you the story behind it. And so pay attention to that story. Be open to reaching out to someone and saying, hey, what were your favorite tips from that space? Is there anything that you would do differently? Slide into the DM. I hate that term, but that's exactly what you do is, send a message, introduce yourself, introduce what you're hoping to do. And 90% of the people that we reached out to replied to us and said, oh yeah, we'd love to tell you a little bit about this or do this. So follow and learn and connect from other families. And then the next step is research. So research the campsite you're going to, make sure that it's the right size. Do you want hookups? Do you want a boondock? Don't show up and then don't know, especially if it's, you in your plan, you're going to arrive late. Just do the research and then have backup plans. Things aren't going to go as planned every single time. We ended up at resorts that were closed that said that they weren't, and you have to have a backup plan. The next piece goes back to learning from other families. Develop out a community. whether that's through online forums or, again, reaching out to people on social media, whether that be Facebook or Instagram or TikTok, whatever. Reach out to people, and the people that you connect with the most, build a little community there, because you're going to have hard times. You're going to have good times. You want to, hey, Michelle, what happened there? How did you navigate through this? I'm having a really hard time with my daughter with this situation. Being able to develop that community of like-minded people is really, really important. And then the last thing that I have, this is I think, don't do, is don't be so rigid. I'm a perfectionist, and so I want it to be rigid with the plan. We'll do this.
I'm a recovering perfectionist.
I should say that as well. I'm hopefully to be a recovering perfectionist. But you get into the rigidity, right? And you go, okay, it's going to be this, and then it's going to be this. And if you don't leave that room for flexibility, you're going to be so frustrated all of the time, because when you travel, nothing goes according to plan unless it goes according to plan. Like I feel like it's two extremes.
Yeah, that's probably the one guarantee, is that it will most likely not go to plan.
Yeah.
And it sounds like the RV or the sort of nomadic travel communities probably really helpful, probably really likes to help each other. And it sounds like a group that you can rely on.
Overwhelmingly helpful. Like, we got travel guides from places. We had this one gal who sent us details on Yellowstone, and she basically gave us her entire itinerary down to the detail of like pack in, pack out. And so, those types of things, if you just ask, people show up. It's incredible.
Yeah. And those types of things are like gold. I mean, that saves you so much time and questioning, and that's awesome.
Yeah.
And so you did buy a motorhome, right?
Yeah.
You didn't rent one? Okay. And so what would you tell people? I mean, that's a big purchase. So what are the considerations that people need to think about before taking that big step?
So we did a tow behind before. So this isn't our first adventure into camping. I guess I'd say glamping, or however you want to say it.
Right.
This wasn't our first adventure into it. And so we did a tow behind, and so we knew what we didn't want. And we didn't want to have to tow something, back it in, do the whole setup thing. We wanted to be able to drive in, drive out. And so one of our first considerations was, well, we're going to do this long time, and for a very significant amount of time, a very extended period, we should go as big as possible. And we did some research on that, and as big as possible actually limits you from being flexible. And flexibility, being able to adventure and, go from one site to another, that was a big piece of it. And so my recommendation is start with your motivations, right? Really write down a list and go, okay, what are we hoping to do? What are we hoping to accomplish? Where do we see ourselves? Before we even go into buying a motorhome or renting a motorhome, figure out what you want to do, how you want to explore. Do you want to be in the mountains? Do you want to be by a resort? Do you want to be more by cities? Do you want to boondock? It's really important to understand what your priorities are for traveling before you make such a big purchase. And then once you know your priorities, go rent and see if that's the right way to do it. I mean, most people aren't renting fifth wheels, but if you can make the investment into renting, it's going to be expensive. Rent for a month or two. I'm a germaphobe, like OCD about germs. Which
is good in this day and age.
I know, but it would have we may have made a few different decisions had we rented. I'm very happy with the decision that we landed in, but it took us a while to get to that decision. We had to look at a lot more units. We had to go test drive a lot more units to arrive at that decision. Whereas if we would have rented, we would have had the experience for what we were looking for. And so write down your motivations, write down your intentions, and be realistic with it, because we had one idea in our head where room was the most important thing. Well, you start going down the checklist of, okay, if room is important, well, then what are you giving up to have that room? You're giving up flexibility. You're giving up being able to be deep in the woods very consistently. There's a lot of things that you may give up from that. You have to go buy a truck that can, tow the capacity. There's just a lot of things that go into it. So start with your list. How are you going to use it, and go from there, and rent.
Yeah, I like that idea of like baby stepping it, rent maybe something small, and then graduating to something big, or just going for the big thing before you make that commitment. Do the test run. That's probably really important. You talked about being flexible. So how did that work in terms of having a plan and like booking sites and then leaving that room for flexibility? How were you able to achieve that?
So I have to thank my wife for this because she put a lot of effort into this. So we had good team and good balance with that. So we started with, well, where do we want to go? And we mapped out like larger states, larger parks, kind of worked through that process, and then identified, okay, we narrowed it in. Okay, we're going to go to Washington. Okay, great. Where are the 5 places in Washington that we would like to see? And we booked a little bit later into the season, so we actually had less options than most people would have. And so if you start at the beginning of the year, you can go onto the national park website. You have a lot more accessibility to sites than you do booking and planning mid-year. And so that was an advantage and a disadvantage because it made us look differently at the way that we were approaching our travel. And so how this worked from a hybrid perspective is we knew that there was sites that we had to make, that we wanted to book because you had to book them because they were filling up. Then there were other places where we knew we wanted to be, and there was a lot of first come first serve, and so we would have a few backup plans. So a lot of Oregon, when we did Oregon, we had 3 options for where we would go, and it's always scary when you're arriving at 11 p.m. and you're at that third option. You're like, oh no, this is the last one. I'm not sure. I hope they're not full.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. But then there's always, the Cracker Barrel or the wall, so it's being flexible in that sense of having a plan, but then having, redundancy to that plan, having backups to it.
And so do you have any recommendations when it comes to like the logistics and planning? It sounds like you learned to have the backup plans. Anything else? Are there apps that really help you with planning and booking that you like?
Yeah. So go on a forum, whatever type of camping you want to do, go on a forum, you'll find a lot of things. Ours, we actually did a non-traditional, planning app. There's this app called Milanote that I really love because we not only planned, our routes and locationally where we wanted to be, we kind of put like this mood board together, and it's got a really cool shared space. So what it is, you can set these boards up. And so, we had like a camping board, so like here's when we do camping, this is the idea that we want to do it. We had a board for when we were shopping for the motor coach of, here's what we're looking for, here's what we want. And so, it was just a great place to throw pictures into. When I would go talk to a friend or, go ask someone from a DM, we would put it into our ideas, thoughts, and inspiration. And, we just planned it all in there. And it's a really great tool because you can, link tasks together. You can link projects together, and we have the budget in there as well.
Oh, nice.
So it's a really flexible space, and it's your non-traditional space that you would see on forums usually. This is an app that came from the business side of the world for me. And then 2, I know this sounds really, really trivial, but put your things on the calendar and a shared calendar together. So, we're going to be in Jackson Hole from this day to this day, just so it's there and you're not losing it. We always put the reservation details redundantly, both in Milanote and the shared calendar, because we always ran into, you don't have service here. So we made sure that there was something stored locally on the phone for the places that would be reservation details, site details, store it locally. It's a huge, huge hassle if you have to figure out a way to get connectivity, store it locally, or print it, but have that local backup. And then also when it comes to planning and logistics, ask friends, right, that have done it before, right? I got that itinerary from a friend. That's a big piece of it. And then just take out the little chunks that you like and the chunks that you don't like, and then put it into your planning app, whatever you're using. I love Milanote, and it's milanote.com. It's free. You have to pay for it when you expand your boards out to a certain space criteria, but we didn't get that far. We contained it into the boards that we have, and a free app for you to have everything. It's got a mobile and a desktop app.
Yeah, I'm going to link that in the show notes. That way people can check it out.
Awesome.
And then, so is there any gear that you just found really indispensable on your trip?
Yes. Okay. So I was still doing a little bit of work. I'm a freelancer at heart, photographer at heart, and so there was this other company that I was building on the side, and so that was a part of this, and so I. I would go out into go get a hammock, and I'd go out and work, and talk to some of my other founders of the company, and so access to power anywhere was really, really important. I know it may not be for everyone. And I went through a lot of different variations of how to do this without, needing to be tethered to the rig or have a generator constantly running if you're not on shore power. And I went through I want to say 4 or 5 different solar battery packs. I'm getting to the point now. It's solar battery pack. The one that I love, it's a 50-watt unit. It was perfect throughout the day, as long as you have sun and you rotate it around to make sure you're continuing to get the most amount of sun from it. It's called the Goal Zero Nomad. We got it at REI. It's a little bit heavier. It's 8 pounds, so I wouldn't recommend it if you're a backpacker per se. But if you're casually, going a few miles up a trail, or if you're just working out in the sun by the pool somewhere, or by a lake or a river, this solar power unit was awesome. It lasted me for my laptop, for various calls, and for my cell phone, and anything else that you would need to charge. It's 50 watts, pretty strong.
And then, so this might be along those lines, but what did you find difficult about living the nomad lifestyle? Like, were there unexpected struggles other than maybe not having like power, but it sounds like you found a solution to that?
Yeah, so this was expected, but then unexpected how much it would impact us, but alone time. So me and my wife had 0 alone time for 10 weeks, which is difficult for a relationship, right? We have 2 kids, 2 dogs, 6 of us, and less than 320 square feet. You need some alone time. So we tried to make the best of it, and we'd say, okay, kids, we did the kid dinner. We're going to do adult dinner by the fire tonight. So we tried to make the best of it. We had an idea originally when we were going to travel, because we thought, COVID will, it'll start to die down. We're like, oh, we can go on and we can do sitters, or we can do an Airbnb for a weekend and go do a date night and then have a sitter come there. Of course, COVID happened, so none of those things worked out. So I think that was the most difficult piece of living the nomad lifestyle with a family is your marriage, right? Or your relationship. And so my recommendation there, have dinner by the fire, have drinks by the fire, and it's okay to tell the kids, don't open that door.
Right. Yes.
Unless it's an emergency and something is on fire, this is mom and dad time.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure that sounds super important. And your kids are 6 and
9. Yeah. Olivia is 9 and
okay.
Noah is 6.
Okay. And you had 2 dogs too. Actually, I don't think I knew that.
Yeah, we have 2 dogs, Buddy, and 2 puppies, mind you.
Wow.
So, yeah.
That was a full motorhome. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, there were the ups and downs, but I wouldn't trade it for the world. It brought the 6 of us closer than we have ever been. During the isolation of COVID, each of us, we retreated to our room essentially, right? Like I was in my office, my wife was, either in the living room downstairs or in our bedroom. The kids were in their rooms, and that was it until it was lunch or dinner. And then we'd try to find something to do, but you're isolated, you're in your own space. And so we all converge into one space together. And it's interesting. It gives you a different perspective on being able to see Noah process something, when he, makes a poor choice and we have to discipline him. It's not, hey, let's go to timeout in your room. It's, hey, we're going to have meditation time, or we're going to have timeout right here. And you physically get to see him process every single bit of him going from, I made a bad choice, I'm being disciplined to it, towards, okay, here, how can I make a better choice? It also forced them to play together so much better. It was awesome. So, but lots of benefits. Yes.
And so that leads in nicely to, what did you love about living the nomad lifestyle?
Every moment is a memory. Every moment, good or bad, every moment is a memory, and it's in a new space, right? When you're at home, you almost become numb to the memories. At least I do. I'll use I language. You take things for granted. Oh, it's another dinner. Oh, we're going to play a video game or a board game again. Oh, we're going to go walk the dogs, or take them to the dog park, or go around the park. It's you're out of your environment, so every moment is a memory. Okay, are we going to eat inside today, or are we going to go have a picnic in the woods somewhere? Every moment is a memory, and I think that was my favorite part of it. I couldn't take photos fast. I actually had to set rules up for not taking as many photos because it took me out of the moment. But every moment is an actual memorable moment that I would want to relive over and over and over again, the good and the bad.
Yeah, I think that's what's so powerful about traveling is when you're not in your normal space, and it's not that you don't appreciate it, but there's something that I think just gives you a higher level of awareness of what you're experiencing because everything's sort of stimulated on a different level, which I love that. So how did this experience change you, or how do you feel like it shifted your perspective? Did you gain clarity on your values?
It changed me in two ways. So you opened this podcast asking me, tell me a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your story. And I hated telling people about my story. I hated telling people, I grew up poor and that I was homeless and I've had all this adversity throughout I hated telling my story. And something about traveling brought me closer to myself. It helped me connect more with myself to the point where, even a year ago, I wouldn't imagine sitting down with you and going, hey, world, whoever is going to hear this whenever, I was homeless one day. And like that, it made me confront the shame a little bit differently because, for the first time, which is sad, in my adult life, I had a lot more alone time. I've got some really good routines where, I meditate in the morning, but it's a part of my routine through the day where you're out in the woods, you have this sporadic hike, it's all stripped down and you're forced into new environments and you're forced to confront yourself. It changed me in that sense. It helped me grow closer to myself. It helped me have more appreciation for myself, more love for myself. And then it also helped me have more grace and patience for my family because, again, like, instead of, you have a disagreement with your wife and then you go into your separate corners and then you come back, you're there the entire time with them. So you work through it, you see, okay, I'm going to go to this side of the trailer and you're going to be over here, and you're forced to work through it in a different way than we ever have. And so it improved communication for us as well as a family. It helped us grow closer together as a family. And then, the last thing that I can just think of in my head, it helped me confront my perfectionism. Because you have an idea, you have a plan, but that plan changes in a moment and you just have to be flexible, especially COVID, because you had, not only do you have a plan and that plan fails, then you have to figure out a COVID appropriate plan, a COVID appropriate backup plan. And it helped me let go of more things. I find myself just letting go of more, a screw will fall and you're like, oh, just got to let that go. It'll get fixed when it gets fixed. You end up on one road, it's too rutted. You can't get the RV up. You've got to go a different way. And that's just a part of the experience. And so I think it's really matured me in terms of the way that I connect with myself, the way that I connect with others, and then also my ability to work through and wrestle with my perfectionism.
Yeah, I can super relate. I am like queen planner. I love a plan. I love a spreadsheet. I love a calendar. And I have, I struggle with perfectionism, and traveling is the one thing that's just like, nope, nothing is in your control. Like if you ever want to realize that, like traveling just kind of smacks you in the face with it because there's so many variables that you can't control. And I similarly, like it's really the biggest part of my life that's helped push me out of that, like trying to control. Not to say that having a plan doesn't help when you're traveling, but it's just the flexibility part comes in. For sure.
Don't abandon the plan, but don't be so rigid to it where you're not enjoying life.
Right. And then you realize how much joy and fun you can have when you're just in the moment and you're just appreciating the craziness maybe that's going around you. I can relate to what you're saying. I grew up for about the first 10 years of my life, pretty poor. Didn't have a lot. Single mom, lived with my grandmother. My dad was like in and out of prison. And that's not a side of my story that I like to share necessarily. I think there's been a lot of time spent just keeping it under wraps because the people in my life, they wouldn't really relate, right? Because you work hard and you achieve these things in your education and your career, and it just seems like so far removed. But I know that talking to other people and hearing their stories, through this podcast has really helped, because your story is a lot of people's story. And I just think it's a great way to connect. And like I heard you say that, it does help kind of pull back that layer of shame, which I think is often there. Because it is not like the quote unquote norm for a lot of people, but then for other people it is. So it's interesting how much like growth can come through pushing ourselves to have these experiences.
It grounds you. And, it's funny because I was even censoring myself until you went all in, because my dad was also in and out of prison as well. And so it's like, had you not said that, I would have never brought that up. And I think that's what's so important and so meaningful about, like, when you think about the idea of like, oh, stories by the campfire, that's something that only travel can provide you, that opportunity to go connect with a complete stranger and get to know that stranger for who they are, stripped down from all the distractions of the typical world. It kind of neutralizes the playing field. This very much feels like a conversation that, if I bumped into you at the, walking into the bathroom at a resort somehow, you just stumble into these conversations and you're like, wow, like you're just like me. And that's really cool,
Yeah.
It removes the isolation.
Right. I was listening to this interview with actually two of my favorite podcasters. Brene Brown was interviewing Guy Raz from How I Built This.
Yes.
And it was like my dream interview to listen to. But he said, and I don't know if this is his saying, but, he said, you don't know someone until you know their story. And I think that's so true, because we can tend to make a lot of assumptions about what people have or haven't experienced. But unless you know their full story, you're not really getting like who they are and the essence. And we all have stories to tell. So I think that interchange of our stories is really, really important.
Yeah, I agree.
Just to help us all feel connected.
And that's another thing. I felt connected to people more than I had ever by traveling, because you're out at the dump site and someone's like, oh, hey, you left that off. And, you exchange numbers and then somehow you run into each other, 700 miles away, it's this weird, it's this weird connected energy that happens when you travel.
Yeah. I think when you put yourself out there, literally, like when you're actually moving more in the world, it's like you have these opportunities to have these experiences with people. So I wanted to ask you, what were some of your favorite like cities or landmarks or just places that you visited and thought, oh, this is a really awesome place?
Okay, so the first thing that stands out for me is GRANDE, so Grande RV Resort in Hot Springs, right over the border in Oregon. Amazing. So it's like 35 sites. They have the cabins closed, but it has a natural hot spring pool right attached directly to the RV resort. And it was an oasis for us because it was so cold coming over the resort or coming over the pass. We had just left Twin Falls, Idaho. And so it was a little chilly. It was still chilly in Oregon. However, being able to go soak your bones, this was week 4 into the trip for us, to just soak and then walk right to your coach was incredible. And this is $45 a night. $45 a night.
Oh my gosh. Worth it. Worth every penny.
So worth it. So number one, I know that sounds so odd, just in the middle of nowhere, hot springs with an RV resort. It was incredible. And that's the thing about travel. And we didn't plan that, by the way. That was something that we said, okay, well, what's halfway between? And we had 4 or 5 sites that we thought we'd go to. This just so happened to be the one that wasn't full. So it's that delightful surprise that was the highlight of our trip. And we called Grandma the next day and we're all in the pool. It was incredible. The next thing that I think stands out for me is also in Oregon. I must have an affinity to Oregon, I guess, through this trip. But it's called Shampooey State Park. And I will never be able to actually spell it because it has an E and a G, maybe 2 G's in it. But it was incredible because they had this amphitheater for the kids to play in. They had all these wooden parks. It was the first place that we could go to where the park was open. They had tens of miles of bike trails. They had a frisbee disc golf course. It was 30 miles south of, or 30 miles south of Portland, I would say. And it was close enough to Portland, but close enough to wilderness as well. And you felt like you were just, I don't know, in a space of your own, surrounded by these incredible farms. So we went and picked berries. We went and this was around October time. So we went to this pumpkin patch. It was incredible. And we had no idea that this is, we knew where the park was. We knew we had reservations there, but we had no idea what was around it. And as we were exploring and driving in, it was incredible. I saw a broccoli farm for the first time, which was really cool. It was fun for the kids to see. There were some wineries, such a delightful experience. And then the last thing that I think stood out for me was going through Big Sur on the 101. Oh my gosh, just being on the coast, driving, seeing, I felt like I went back in time and just went to some prehistoric age and just, I don't know, it was awesome. It was so cool seeing Big Sur from an RV driving. It was like this juxtaposition of this big RV shouldn't be on this little road right next to the
twisty road.
And then, you look down and there's literally 100-foot cliff that it's you, the median, and that's it. That was a really surreal experience. Pro tip. Do not get gas in Big Sur. It is ridiculous. There's one gas station in Big Sur. It's $6 a gallon. I made the mistake of filling up there. It was awful. Don't do it before, do it after.
Yeah. So I live about hour 20 north of Big Sur.
Uh-huh.
So everyone listening, there's a gas station right before you leave Carmel. It's
yes.
Hit that up before you actually go any further because yes, Daryl's right. It's just so expensive.
Like,
that's our public service announcement. For
yes. Saving tens of dollars, hundreds of dollars actually for people.
Yeah. What's funny about what's interesting about your first two examples is I could feel the sense of discovery.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like those were places that stood out to you, but you didn't know that they were there. You didn't plan to go there, and just reminding me of oh, that's the best part of getting out there and traveling too, is that discovery.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and then I have another tip from the tips. Sorry, I just came through my head.
You need them.
Bring your bikes. Travel by bike. Oh my goodness, travel by bike, because you're not going over 17 miles per hour. You're going 10 miles per hour with the kids. You can look around. Bring your bike. It's the best way to visit anywhere. Bring your bike. Travel by bike.
That's a great tip, because I know if you go to Yosemite, bringing bikes is one of the best ways to tool around the valley.
Yep.
And that's a great tip.
Yeah.
Okay. So after traveling around, I guess the western part of the country, did it change your overall impression of the U.S., that part of the U.S., or people or places?
I don't know. So I have traveled a lot. So I was usually on the road 3-ish weeks of a month. And it usually was, going to a conference center or going to, some client's office or, going to another office. And when we traveled as a family, we did the typical tourist thing, where you stay at a resort or you stay at a hotel. Camping, we got our pull behind trailer last year. So this idea of camping in this nature was new to us. Of course we've done tent camping, but that's somewhere close here. It's familiar. You bring the tent up, you do that whole thing. We weren't big outdoors people before this. And so when we would travel somewhere, we would travel to densely populated spaces and you do the tourist thing. And what this helped me realize, and I know this is going to go, well, of course, Daryl, that's really obvious, but it helped me realize the other side of a city when you're basically camping in that city, because the resort isn't going to be in the city. It's not going to be, right downtown. And so it's taking you out and it's putting you into a community, or it's putting you outside the city right away. So number one, you're interacting with different people, right? I would never have went to Auburn, Washington ever I had no need to go to Auburn, Washington until we were staying there. And it gives you a different sense. You feel more like a local when you're, driving from your campsite and you want to go catch a ferry. You're driving there just like a local would. So you experience a city more as if you live in that city versus being a guest into that city. And when you're doing that, it almost opens your horizon a little bit and broadens the way that you can talk about conversations, and people love it. When you're like, oh yeah, I'm staying at this hotel, I feel like people are like closed off to that. When you say, oh yeah, I'm camping down in Auburn, they're like, oh wait, have you tried this? Have you tried this? Or, so it's almost like they see you as a temporary local versus, oh, you're treading into my space. Yeah, you're contributing to tourism, but you're going to come here and you're going to leave. I think when we talk to people that saw us as, oh, we're making this a home for a little bit, rather that be a week, and we plan on coming back and we want to see these new things, people were much more open to us, and it allowed me to get closer to people as well.
Right. Like instead of like, oh, you're just touching down in this hotel, you're actually going to be in the community more. I totally get that. I think that's why I like to stay in Airbnbs more than like resorts typically, because I feel like I want that essence of what would it be like to live here and be in someone else's shoes or live someone else's life. So that's a great, I'm sure that enhanced your experience a lot more than.
I don't think we'll do a hotel. I mean, I say that, but
hotels are nice too.
Yeah. But I think we'll do Airbnb like that because you nailed it. It's a different experience altogether. It's incredible.
Yeah. I feel like it does. If you're looking for like real true connection, it just helps facilitate that a lot easier. And so do you feel like the RV travel community as a whole is inclusive?
Yeah. No, but not with the answer that you would expect to hear from, an African-American man. Of course it's easy to go, yeah, well, it's not inclusive because I don't see a lot of Black people there. Well, okay, there's not a lot of, we're a minority here anyways. I think the biggest issue with the RV community specifically is the age demographic. We're seeing a much older population that are embracing, your traditional RVs, go to the resort, do that whole thing. I think it has more to do with age than it does have to do with race. Of course, race is an easy thing to go to because it's where you can see the most differences. Because you can instantly see it. But, I think about this place that we stayed in Palm Springs, and it was incredible. It was incredible. We went to Joshua Tree, and this resort, it had 5 pools into it. It had tennis courts, but the average age there, I'm not joking, was mid-70s. And we were the youngest couple, and it was amazing because we felt like we had 100 grandma and grandpas, for the kids. They'd offer to, hey, do you want to go on drive in the car and things like that. And their reaction to me made me realize that they don't see a lot of young people here, people that are, early and mid stage in their lives, especially people with kids. And then on top of that, people of color, I have a interracial relationship. And so, you have, me as a Black man, my wife is, Caucasian, and then our kids are this blend between it. So it's like, not only are we young, but then we're, this blended or mixed family. And it was a fun experience. And it just made me realize there needs to be more and that's a big piece of the documentation piece of it, as well as there aren't a lot of mixed couples that are doing this type of thing, let alone young, but mixed minority type couples that are doing it in the RV sense. I'm seeing a lot of people that are converting vans and doing, the nomad thing. We liked the resort side more than we were like, oh yeah, we're going to go boondock for a week. We did some of that, but it was mostly about, let's go to a resort, let's go visit a city. And that's where we saw the biggest difference in demographics is it's a lot of older people, they're retired. And so if you're middle life, early life, and you're listening to this, the RV resorts are incredible because it's a different way to experience a city. You have your home there, and then you've got I don't know. You got this pool here, a tennis court here. You have meals. It's kind of like you're staying at a hotel, but you're connected to a bigger, greater community. I think that's the biggest difference, and the biggest challenge that I see is just the age. And I feel like it's because people think that RVing requires you to go sell your house, and it requires you to do this extreme thing. And it doesn't. We were talking about converting a bus or, doing something different. We ended up not, because we didn't want to do the work. We wanted to just go. But it can be very approachable, and it can be a very fun community. You just have to go out and do it and have fun.
So how would you, other than telling all your friends to go out and do it, how do you think it could, like, the RV community can attract younger families?
Yeah. So the RV resort that we had in Palm Springs was completely different than an RV resort that we experienced in, I forgot to tell you about another leg of our trip. We did a test trip, which I should probably give as a tip as well. We did a 2-week test trip, and during our test trip, there was this resort in, I want to say, Midwest South that we went to, and people were just standoffish. They were rude. It kind of ruined the few days that we were there. Kind of, everyone was to themselves. They didn't want to even make eye contact with you. If the dogs made a little bark, you have people giving you glaring eyes, So, if you're in the RV community, and I doubt any of the people listening to this are actually in the demographic that I would be speaking to say this to, but if you're, it works all the way around. Be inviting, be welcoming, be helpful, ask someone, hey, I know, if you see something, point it out. Hey, I noticed that your trash is on the ground. Just so you know, the raccoons may get into that. You may want to tie that up, or you may want to, just be helpful, be willing to invite yourself and be willing to introduce yourself to your neighbor. That is what the experience at Palm Springs gave us that other resorts wouldn't. And I think that's the biggest way to get people to approach it. Is it's not going to start from the outside in, it's going to start from the inside out. And then people will tell people about the experience. Oh man, when I was in Palm Springs, I went to this resort. The people were so nice. It was so great. You should just go try it. Next time you're doing Coachella, maybe this is a great way to do it, because we loved it so much. And that's how it'll spread, by stories. But they have to be positive stories, because if they're not, I'll just go get a hotel for the same price. Right.
Yeah. Why would you pay the same price to not feel like you're welcome somewhere?
Right. So be welcoming. Even if you're having the worst day, just smile at someone, because that could be their very first time at a resort, period. And you can ruin it with a glance.
Yeah. Just have that idea of, everyone is here to have, to enjoy themselves. Right. And like, how can we all do that together? Make it all a positive experience.
Yeah.
So hopefully we'll start spreading the word and get people to know about that. So I wanted to end with the question that I ask all my guests, and it's not a question, it's a request for you to tell me about a travel experience that brought you joy.
Cool. Yeah. So I've been listening to your podcast for the last 5 episodes. So congratulations on this will be, I don't know, what episode is this, do you think?
I think it's like 17, 18.
Okay, cool.
I should know.
Yeah, well, it's okay. I also do a podcast, and I never know what episode it is either, so that's okay. But I remember when you hit your 10th milestone, and I heard the excitement when you were on that podcast, and that's when I started paying attention to this joy question. I was like, okay, I know she's going to ask me that, so I need to make sure that I'm prepared for it.
You did your research.
I did my research.
Like it.
And there was one thing that stood out to me the most, and it's something that I actually posted recently, is when we were driving down into Malibu. There was this resort that we were staying at in Malibu, and we were driving from where were we at before that? We were driving from Santa Barbara down to Malibu, and we took the 101, and it was becoming sunset, and there was just all these great beaches, and I was in our tow behind car. I was driving at the time. And it was me and my daughter, and we were just talking the whole time. And we came across this beach. I don't know the name of the beach. I should know. And she said, let's pull over, Dad. Let's watch the sunset. And it was like, oh, without a doubt, we're going to do this, and, to the point where I didn't even text my wife like, hey, we're pulling over and doing this. I left the phone in the car and we just, we took our shoes off and we just went and ran into the sand. And I grabbed my camera on the tripod and like, let's document this, because one, sporadic moments like that didn't happen a lot. When I'm in my office, or, I get home from a flight on Friday and I'm just tired, and then, you're recovering in the weekend. Those just sporadic moments of connection with my daughter didn't happen a lot. And, they're here and there, but this really stood out for me because it was a special moment, just the two of us. We watched the sunset. There was a lifeguard that was also watching the sunset. There was people running, and we just danced and we sat in the water, and she found a sunflower. It was just one of those moments where you couldn't be anywhere else if you tried. You're fully present. And, that's another thing that I'm working on, is becoming more present. And that moment, it brought me so much joy, so much presence, and so much connection to my daughter. It's something I'll remember forever.
That's really beautiful. And something's a joyous moment when the person you're telling is like, can feel the joy too, like can just completely envision that, moment of, you enjoying the sunset, playing with your daughter. That's really beautiful.
I could have died right there and said, I live, been happy, done. I mean, she would have probably been sad, but that was one of those things where
it ruined the moment, but
yeah, sign off on life. We're good at this moment. And, now that I'm thinking back to it, it puts you in this space where you want to chase more moments like that. And that's why I think traveling can be so addictive, because you get this moment and you're like, oh, I want more moments like that. More moments where people haven't experienced something, more moments where I'm connected to mind, body, and soul. You only get that traveling. And I think that's why it's so addictive.
I 100% agree. So where can people find out more about you?
There's a few places. I think Instagram, number one, it's Daryl Kelly _ So I'm also a CEO of a freelancing productivity tool for people that are getting started, middle of their road freelancing, or they're, thriving as a freelancer and they want more organization. So we started this company mid traveling because I loved the photography business, but hated the rest of it. And so I have a podcast that I'd also, love to, and I think you're going to be on it, aren't you? We're going to have another conversation.
I'd love to have another conversation with you.
I'm going to get you on it. It'd be awesome. But the podcast is called the Hectic Podcast, and we talk with other freelancers, a lot of people that are traveling as well, and they're sharing their tips of how they work on the road or how they've started their career freelancing, whether that be photography, writing, developing. And so there's a really cool place for that.
Great. And actually, can you just summarize the Hectic app real quick? Because I think our audience would actually be interested in that. There's a community of travelers and people who live that, not necessarily the corporate 9 to 5, but make their work lives work for their traveling, which I think can be done a lot through freelance.
So Hectic is this single digital workspace with all the tools, again, like needed to manage, start, and grow a freelancing business, all built into one space with a community, right? Community is really big, and experts that are built right in. So, we've got this idea that Hectic is all about changing the future of work and making it easy, just as easy to work for yourself as it would be to work for someone else.
You've been an amazing guest. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Absolutely.
Thanks for listening to the Explore and You podcast. Don't worry, we have a new episode every week. Subscribe so you don't miss it. And don't forget to visit exploreandyou.com for more inspiration and tips. If you want to share the love, you're welcome to send this podcast to others. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.